The wedding didn't go as planned. When my sister got taken away in handcuffs, she showed up uninvited to my wedding, right after the ceremony, and turned my special day into chaos. My wedding didn't go as smoothly as I'd hoped. I'm 24, and I got married about a week ago. Unfortunately, my older sister Stasi, who's 26, caused a stir. There's always been a strong rivalry between us. Ever since we were kids, we often argued, trying to prove who was better, and we rarely got along. Over time, things didn't improve. We tried to hide our feelings from others, but inside, tensions were high. Our parents knew we didn't get along, but didn't step in to help us reconcile. That might have contributed to some of the issues we faced later. When Stacey turned 18, she left for college. I felt relieved. Not having to tiptoe around her was a weight off my shoulders. She'd come home for holidays, bragging about her successful life at one of the state's top business schools. I was a little jealous, but my goal was to outdo her. I succeeded by getting into an Ivy League university, which hit Stacey hard since my achievements got more attention than hers. I thought our rivalry might end there, but I was wrong. Then Stacey announced she'd start a business with our dad's help. She pulled it off, whether through luck or effort. I'm not sure, but a few years ago her business took off. She moved to Japan to grow it, and it became a huge success. Our parents were proud of her. That was about 2 years ago, and she's been living there since. Meanwhile, things didn't go as well for me after college. Stassi's success made my struggles feel heavier. I found a job, but it wasn't what I dreamed of, so I quit soon after. Looking back, that was a mistake. I was too focused on outshining her instead of building my own path. At my wedding, Stacey showed up uninvited and made a scene. She loudly claimed my kids, born before marriage, weren't properly part of the family. Her behavior crossed a line, and we had to call the police. It was supposed to be a joyful day, but she turned it into something else. Looking back, quitting my job wasn't the smartest move. I regret it, but there's no changing it now. After I left, I hoped luck would find me, but it didn't. I started feeling down, and it didn't help that Stasi's business was thriving while our parents kept praising her. I didn't like it, but I stayed quiet to avoid seeming upset. Though I felt that way inside, I hid it during family gatherings and pretended to be happy for her. Anything else felt out of place. Around that time, I met my future husband, Jackson. He's 25, and I'm so glad he came into my life. It changed everything. It'd been about 6 months since I quit, and I was still hoping for a break, but nothing came. I felt disappointed and stuck, so I downloaded a dating app to distract myself. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just a way to take my mind off how tough things were. Money was tight. I could barely cover rent and essentials. I relied on my parents sending me cash each month. I had some savings, but they ran out fast, and paying bills was a struggle. I promised them I'd pay it back when I could, but I could hear the disappointment in their voices. That got to me, especially since Stasi was doing so much better and I felt like a letdown in their eyes. I started using the dating app a lot. Meeting people, even ones I didn't really like, helped me escape my worries for a bit. For a few weeks I went on dates with guys who just wanted something casual. It was surface level, but then I met Jackson. He stood out right away, funny, engaging, and we clicked instantly. Jackson was a straight-A student in school and went to culinary school after graduating. When we met, he was working at a restaurant. He was funny, charming, and had a great mix of confidence and kindness. I told him up front I wasn't looking for anything serious. After nearly 2 weeks of texting, he asked me out and said he wanted a real relationship, not something fleeting. He was dating to find someone to marry. I liked his honesty, so I decided to give it a shot, not knowing where it'd lead. Our first date was amazing. It felt like we'd known each other forever. It might have been the best date I'd ever had. We had a great time, and with him I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. That was a refreshing change from how I usually felt around others. The conversation flowed easily, and we connected right away. Something shifted in me, and I gave our relationship a chance. After a couple more dates, 3 months in, I found out I was pregnant. My only worry then was how Jackson would react. By that point, he knew everything important about me. Early on, I'd told him about my life, my family, and how I'd always competed with Stasi to outdo her. Being with Jackson made me want to be a better version of myself. I knew just as much about him as he did about me. He encouraged me to push past my rut and look for work instead of waiting for something to happen. I ended up going back to my old job at the same company I'd left, one of my best decisions. When I found out I was pregnant, I wasn't too stressed. I'd been working for a month, and things with Jackson were going great. I just wondered what he'd think. Most guys might have thought it was too soon and backed off, but I wanted to keep the baby. It felt right, even if I can't fully explain why. I felt ready to be a mom. To my surprise, Jackson supported me. He said it was my choice, and he'd stand by me either way. When I told him I wanted to keep the baby, he was thrilled. He admitted he'd hoped I'd decide that because he felt ready too, even though we were young and had only been together a couple of months. Jackson said he didn't want to seem pushy, so he left the decision to me. But when I chose to keep the baby, he said it made him the happiest person alive. We agreed not to rush into marriage despite the pregnancy, and to take time to get to know each other better. It was a mutual choice. A couple of weeks later, we found out we were having twins. It was another big surprise, but we welcomed it happily. Soon after, Jackson moved in with me, and I met his parents around that time. His parents were warm and kind. They seemed to love all their kids equally and never pitted them against each other. It was a healthy family dynamic, something I'd never seen growing up. I wasn't sure about introducing Jackson to my family, though. I figured my parents wouldn't approve of my choices. I'd been a promising student with big prospects, and now I was having kids with a guy I hadn't known long and living with him. Most parents might question that, and I thought mine would be shocked. So I put it off until my belly started showing, and I couldn't hide it anymore. At 4 months pregnant, I invited my parents over and asked Jackson to be there for support. They knew I was dating him, but didn't know we were living together or expecting kids. I braced for them to be upset, but their reaction surprised me. They were happy. They hugged me, congratulated me, and were overjoyed. When I told them it was twins, Mom nearly fainted from excitement. It wasn't what I expected, but I was relieved they weren't mad. They even threw me a little party and proudly told everyone they'd soon be grandparents. I explained that Jackson and I didn't want to marry just because of the kids. We'd live together first and decide later. They were fine with that, and supported us fully. It blew me away in a good way. I was so grateful they had my back. I couldn't have handled it if they'd turned away or tried to change my mind. Later, I told them I hadn't expected their support. They admitted they weren't always the best parents when we were kids. They thought letting me and Stasi compete pushed us to achieve more, but now they see it differently and want to be there for me. Over time, my parents realized our rivalry with Stasi might have hurt us in the long run. They figured this out when I quit my job to chase something bigger. They saw my choice was partly driven by Stasi starting her business and succeeding. I wanted to do my own thing to stand out. I found it odd they knew this since I never told them, but they said they just sensed it as parents and felt responsible. They wanted me to know it didn't matter who was more successful. I didn't need to compete with Stasi to prove my worth. They loved us both and were proud of us for always trying our best. That talk meant a lot to me. I'm glad we cleared the air. It made things easier during and after my pregnancy. I could ask them for help with the kids while Jackson and I worked. They said they'd tried talking to Stasi too, but it didn't go as hoped. She laughed it off, saying she didn't need to hear it. She thought I hadn't achieved as much as her. My parents stayed patient, assuring us they were proud of us equally, but Stasi wouldn't accept their efforts to improve. She believed her success made her more worthy. They promised to talk to her again when she visited for the holidays, thinking a face-to-face chat would help more than online. They hoped she'd let go of the rivalry too. Before that, Stasi often made snarky comments, especially after I announced my pregnancy. In the family chat, she'd write things that felt out of place and got under my skin. She focused on me having kids before marriage and living with Jackson, someone I hadn't known long. For her, it was a win, but I didn't see any reason to feel bad about my choices. Her behavior got to me sometimes, and I considered leaving the family chat. My parents convinced me to stay, saying they were working on making things better and wanted us to stick together. I agreed for their sake. They promised to address it and do their best to stop the tension. If it didn't work, I could leave later. When Stasi came home for Christmas, they said they'd talk to her, and they did, but by then, her attitude toward me had grown too strained. She kept highlighting her achievements, knowing I was pregnant and my accomplishments weren't as visible. Back from Japan, she didn't miss a chance to bring up her business. She'd boast, give me odd looks, or ask if I was happy for her. It made me uncomfortable, so I left the family gathering early to stay calm and avoid getting upset in front of everyone. After that Christmas gathering, my parents tried talking to Stasi to get her to ease up. She said she'd worked hard for her success and wouldn't let me take that from her. She'd keep celebrating it, and I'd have to deal with it. That's when I decided to cut ties with her and left the family chat. My parents thought it was for the best too. We didn't speak for 2 years, and I had no idea what she was up to. But about 4 weeks ago, some relatives told me she'd returned from Japan with a child. They said it's a lovely 2-month-old baby. My parents mentioned they'd video called Stasi a few times before she came back, but they never noticed anything hinting at a pregnancy. She wanted to surprise everyone, announcing she'd become a mom and recently married the baby's father. She said the wedding was a private ceremony, a year ago. Now she was ready to share it. The timing felt odd since my wedding was around the same time, and suddenly everyone was talking about her marriage and daughter instead. Stasi explained her husband stayed in Japan for work while she brought the baby to meet the family. I tried not to let it bother me. My wedding was supposed to be my moment. Even after she returned, I avoided her. Unfortunately, that didn't stop trouble. She showed up uninvited to my wedding right after the ceremony. I was glad it happened after we'd said our vows. Seeing her there almost threw me off, but Jackson and my parents calmed me down. It seemed she'd slipped in unnoticed and making a scene would have just played into her hands. The wedding was at Jackson's aunt's farm, where we didn't have tight security, so she got in easily. Now I wish we'd invested more in safety to avoid issues. While she was there, Stasi told guests how happy she was with her wonderful child and made comments about my kids being born before marriage. She shared this with whoever she talked to. Some guests later told me about it, and I had to smile and brush it off to keep the day positive. It was tough, but I managed. I nearly lost it at one point, but before I could say anything, the police burst in. I had no idea what was happening when the police blocked the exits and kept us inside. Moments later, they took Stasi away. It was a shock. A woman was crying and holding a baby, supposedly Stasi's, claiming it was hers. Things got chaotic fast, but the truth came out later. The baby wasn't Stasi's. The photos she'd shown were from her friend's social media, with her edited in. It turned out that after returning from Japan, Stasi was staying with this friend since her apartment lease ended, and she was looking for a new place. She helped with the baby for free. That's why she never invited family over, and only visited them herself. On my wedding day, she took it further, bringing the baby without her friend's permission. She took the child while the parents slept, and stopped answering their calls. Worried, her friends called the police. Luckily, Stasi had been vocal about my wedding and her plans, so they figured out where to find her. That's how the police tracked her down. It was wild, and I still can't wrap my head around it. My family and I are still processing it. I knew Stasi was competitive, but going this far to stand out was unsettling. Now she's trying to convince her friends to drop the complaint, knowing she'd likely lose in court. She hasn't been detained yet, but she blames me, saying I got married despite her. We hadn't talked in nearly 2 years, not since our last argument. I even let her stay at the wedding to avoid drama, but she turned it into a spectacle. Yesterday, she contacted me, saying I should convince her friends that my wedding and kids pushed her to act out. She thinks I'm at fault. I told her I didn't want to get involved and said her actions were over the line. Now my parents think I should help her by talking to her friends, suggesting she was upset about my marriage and kids. They hope it'll get the complaint dropped. It's tricky since she lived with them and helped with the baby, so the police aren't sure how to proceed without their input. If she hadn't been so involved, it'd be a clearer case. Stasi claims she had permission to take the baby, but there's no proof yet. She's avoided consequences so far, and it hinges on her friends dropping the complaint. I'm not sure I want to step in. I don't think Stasi deserves my help. My parents believe it'd be wrong to refuse, but I'm torn. Am I wrong for not wanting to step in? It's a tough call. Let me know what you think in the comments. Now on to updates. Update 1. I've decided to step back from my whole family, including my parents. Yes, they were a huge help during my pregnancy and after the kids were born, and I'm thankful for that. But right now, I need space. Whether they support me or not isn't my focus. I just want to be with my husband and kids. I can't do that if I keep getting pulled into their issues. It's affecting me too much, and I'm grateful for what my parents did after I announced my pregnancy. But I'm worn out from everything with Stas. I think you get why I don't want to help her. She created this mess herself. Jackson agrees it's the right move, and that's that. Update 2. I just heard from relatives that Stasi's in serious trouble. Her friends decided to push forward with the case. She's been saying she had permission to take the baby whenever she wanted, but proving that in court will be tough, especially after her actions at my wedding and pretending the baby was hers. I don't see how she'll get out of this. It's sad, but not surprising. I'm still not talking to my parents and won't until they acknowledge I made the right call by stepping back and stop asking me to help Stasi. I know I'm asking a lot, but I don't want to talk to my parents until they see how their approach affected me and Stasi growing up. They need to realize they played a part in this. Update 3. Hey there, Stasi's trial is happening now, and we don't know how it'll end. She could face up to 5 years if found guilty, though her state might lead to a shorter sentence. Either way, it's not our concern anymore. Jackson and I are planning our honeymoon to make up for the chaotic wedding. I can't ask my parents to watch the kids since we're not speaking, so we'll ask Jackson's parents instead. I really hope our honeymoon goes better than the wedding did. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments. I honestly thought Stasi's friends would drop the complaint. It's odd they didn't, but I get why they were shaken up. I agree our parents could have stopped our rivalry early on. I wonder how things would have turned out if I'd outdone Stasi. Would she have reacted this way? She could have just enjoyed her success, maybe teased me a little, and left it at that. Why take it further? I kept thinking this might be some wild story from Japan, but nope, it's real life. Thanks for sticking with this story. Let me know in the comments if you agree with me, or have your own take. Check out our other videos and good luck to you all.